from NJ.com. This is Talk is Cheap, a New York Giants podcast. We're talking Big Blue football all year round.
Welcome aboard, Giants fans, to Talk is Cheap, our New York Giants podcast right here on NJ.com. I'm Joe Giglio, joined as always by James Cratch and Dan Duggan. They cover the Giants for NJ Advanced Media. They were at MetLife Stadium on Sunday to watch the Giants lose once again. 27-22 loss to the Los Angeles Chargers, dropping to 0-5. You know, I think, guys, as we break this down and go into it and look forward, this we could probably classify as the worst regular season Giants loss and day in a very long time. Injuries abound. Odell Beckham's season looks over. The Giants' season is over. Everything is in a flux moving forward. I just keep coming back to this, James, to start us off. 5 weeks ago, we were talking about this team being a playoff team, making a run, looking forward and having their eyes on the Super Bowl. 5 weeks later, it feels like the franchise has been flipped upside down again. They've already lost as many games as they did all of last season. I mean, what was the feeling there that you felt in that stadium, in that locker room, when that whole thing came to an end yesterday?
I think they're stunned, bewildered, angry. I mean, embarrassed. I think this kind of sums up everything. The Chargers have basically no home. They play in a soccer stadium. They left San Diego. Their fan base has abandoned them. They had lost 9 straight games dating back to last season. The last time the Chargers had won before Sunday was November 27th of last year. To give Giants fans some context, the Giants were in Cleveland that day. JPP had, I think, 3 sacks. They demolished the Browns, and that team was just rolling. The Chargers fly across country. They have a 10 a.m. Pacific time kickoff, and they beat the Giants at home in MetLife Stadium. That is how pathetic this Giants season has gotten. And with the injury to Beckham, which we'll get into, everything about it, I mean, it was over before Sunday, but I think it really hit home, I think, to the fan base, and I assume to the players and the coaches, that they are possibly the biggest flop in the history of New York sports, which is pretty remarkable. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really much to talk about from the game. I think we need to kind of start spinning it forward, but, I mean, what a mess.
Worst team money can buy. I mean, Dan, that was it's bad. I mean, it's bad in every way. They are a bad football team that now is going to be talent deficient moving forward because the wide receiving core was depleted yesterday. And the biggest story off of the game, off of what actually happened in the field, and we'll get to everything off the field and what happens next, but Odell Beckham, who's the best player this franchise has, is now, he has a serious injury. I mean, he's been battling an injury since August, but now this one requires surgery and is going to end his season most likely.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's done, and it's one of those deals where even if he somehow could come back, what would be the point? But yeah, I think this is a serious enough injury where that's not even going to be an option. I mean, there's so many different ways you can look at this. I mean, just from the on-field perspective, again, they're 0-5 and they're done. But remember how bad they were in week 1 without Odell? We're going to have to watch that for 11 weeks now. I mean, this team's going to be absolutely unwatchable. It's going to be such a horrendous stretch. I mean, I remember watching Sunday Night Football last night, and they were kind of trying to tease the game ahead, and they basically were, the Giants, they'll show up. I mean, it was a rough sell on the broadcast to try and get people to tune into that one. Because at least with Odell, at least it would be interesting, and you'd have to watch. But yeah, now I mean, for him, it's what a season it's been. I mean, just everything that could go wrong has gone wrong for him. Starting with the injury in the preseason, you could go back further. I mean, it's just been the controversies going back to skipping OTAs and then wanting to be the highest paid player in the league. He didn't hold out, didn't get the big contract, and now this is what happens. Have to wonder if there's any regrets on his end. It's gonna be fascinating to see how the Giants proceed. I know James wrote about it on Monday morning. John Mara basically guaranteed Odell's getting paid. Well, now he has this significant injury. When does that payday come? He's on the books next year for about $8.5 million. Do they give him an extension before seeing him get back on the field and being sure that he's 100%? Because if one thing this franchise knows is that they've had great wide receivers go down with injuries and never be the same again, and no one's expecting that with Odell with this type of injury. I mean, he should be able to recover and get back to full strength, but that has to be a little bit scary when you start talking about making a long-term commitment. So it's just going to be a mess. I mean, like I said, the season is going to be a mess without him, and how they handle him going forward. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there because again, I mean, this is a big injury, and where he's at his contract status, I just can't see giving a guy, a huge extension at this point. So it's going to be fascinating to see how everything unfolds with Odell going forward here.
It is. And James, when you consider the Odell injury, the uncertainty now with him moving forward, and like you wrote about this morning, Mara's promise, and do they pay him? What do they pay him? He's their best player. We don't know now what his short and long-term future looks like. Their quarterback, Eli Manning's clearly past his best days and is on the back end. The team is 0-5. The head coach, we've questioned all year. The fan base seems to be tired of. The GM is on his second coach. If this coach doesn't work, I don't think many GMs get to pick a third NFL head coach. I can't think of a time, maybe when they fired Jim Fossil, when they were trying to pick Tom Coughlin. I mean, I just can't think of a time the future of the Giants looks so uncertain, which is amazing because we were talking big things 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, Joe, and I mean, I would throw the owner in there too. I mean, John Mara, he's kind of been out of the public eye, over the past year or so. He did make the comment about the dog peeing thing a couple of weeks ago. Are we going to hear from him at some point soon? I mean, is he going to come out and try to stabilize this franchise and, kind of, I don't know if he can guarantee that, people are going to be back in 2018, but is he going to try to, at least leave hints that, he's comfortable moving forward with the front office and the coaching staff as is? I think he's in a really interesting, tough spot with Beckham too, because he was very effusive in his praise in the preseason and basically said, hey, Odell deserves to be paid a lot of money. We're going to pay him a lot of money. He doesn't have anything to prove to us maturity-wise. But yet he curiously wouldn't commit to opening negotiations with Odell in his camp and wouldn't give him a time frame for when they were going to give him the money. He was kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth. And I think at this point, look, Odell did everything the Giants wanted him to do. He showed up to mini camp. He showed up to training camp. He didn't hold out. He came to work. He played football. He assumed the injury risk that, he knew was there and everyone knew was there. Now it's happened. Now he's injured. He's guaranteed the money next year because the fifth-year option is guaranteed for injury. But beyond that, it's up in the air. And I really wonder, logically, you can't really give him a major deal until you see him get back on the field and prove that he's still the same player. But at the same time, John Merriman basically promised him this money. And you have to wonder, do the Giants have to sign of good faith, give him a pay raise next year, just to do right by him after he did right by them? Do they offer him a short-term extension to kind of give him some money, bump up his pay, and then assess the situation? It's a really, really shaky spot. This injury was kind of the worst-case scenario for the Giants, for Beckham, for everyone involved.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess because of this player, because of what's gone on the summer before. He wanted his money. He didn't get his money. Dan, you think about, James mentioned John Mara here, and this probably would be a good time for him to speak because I think the fan base has questions. They're angry. They want answers. And if the owner doesn't speak, if we don't all get some sort of clarity on what this thing is moving forward, or what at least they're thinking now, well, the question is going to be raised. Every week, every loss, it'll be, is McAdoo going to survive this? And then the questions about the roster and Jerry Reese. Do you think the owner should say something? And do you think it matters? Or do you think they're just going to let him flounder here for the next 11 weeks until this season comes to a merciful end for the Giants?
Yeah, well, aside from the Odell comment about the celebration, Mara doesn't speak, during the season very often. So it would be out of character for him to, step to the podium, tomorrow and address the 0-5 start. I'm not sure what that would accomplish unless he's going to come with a definitive plan. What else is he going to say? Unless he comes out and fires Jerry Reese or Ben McAdoo, if he gets up on the podium and gives some lukewarm endorsement and says, we'll see what happens at the end of the year, that's only going to make things worse, I think. As much as we would like to hear from him, I think he's kind of in a no-win situation unless he knows what he's going to do, and I can't imagine that he does. So I think, actions are going to speak louder than words. When the season ends, he's obviously going to have to address things depending on where things go. I don't think any one of us expects him to turn this thing around. So, if they're sitting there 2-14 on January 1st, again, Mara's actions will speak plenty loud then. because I just don't know, what he can say right now. I mean, he's not going to fire McAdoo today. I mean, I know a lot of fans might want that. What would that accomplish? I mean, they're 0-5. It's not a situation where they're going to turn things around. 0-5 without their best player. So, firing him would just be rearranging, chairs on the Titanic. So I think that they're probably going to have to ride this out again because nothing's going to change if you made an in-season move. They're not, one move away where you light a fire and they'll turn things around. I mean, this season is dead. It's done. So I'd be very surprised if he speaks because, again, as James said, he really hasn't been, doing many public speaking engagements in the recent past. So I think they're going to ride this out. Certainly, McAdoo is going to get those questions about the hot seat, especially if this continues. And Jerry Reese, typically speaks during the bye week. So that should be quite a press conference, knowing how contentious he can be with the media. I'm sure that won't be very comfortable for him. So. I mean, listen, it would be, maybe they'd love it if the owner came out and said, hey, these guys have jobs for life. He can't say that. They're big boys. They're in these high pressure, high spotlight positions. They have to deal with the scrutiny. And again, it's not going to be comfortable for McAdoo, but that's what you get paid for. And if you win some games, then you don't have to answer these questions. So I don't really have too much sympathy for him. And I don't really think it's necessarily Mara's job to put his neck out on the line. Because again, there's no way he can say with certainty what's going to happen. Because if they go 0-16, obviously he's gone. If they go 11-5, which we know is not going to happen, he's obviously back. So you got to just let things play out, in my opinion.
Do you think, James, he can survive this? Let's start with McAdoo. Let's talk about Jerry Reese. I mean, yesterday, our columnist for NJ Advanced Media, Steve Politti, said it's time to clean house. I think a lot of Giants fans feel that might be the right direction, or maybe we'll move towards that as 0-5 snowballs into whatever it ends up as. James, I saw on Twitter last night you were kind of thinking about what this might look like at the end, 3-13, or something to that effect. It's going to be bad, especially now with Odell. Let's start with McAdoo. Can he survive this? I feel like we had this conversation a little bit when they started off 0-3, and just can he survive a bad year? And I think we all thought, well, he went 11-5 last year. The Giants don't really switch coaches that easily, but I don't know if we've ever seen this kind of extreme where you go from 11-5, the playoffs, to this in a 1 year span.
Yeah, Joe, it's so complicated in my opinion. I mean, I know you said start with McAdoo. I feel like we have to start with Jerry Reese, and here's why.
All right, because let's start with Reese then.
Yeah, just because John Mara has, and we'll get back to John Mara, he has set himself up for this because after 2015, when he nudged Tom Coughlin, he pushed him out the door, and he kept Jerry Reese in place. And there is plenty of evidence to say that Jerry Reese should be fired, I think. I mean, I don't think that's in dispute. If you wanted to fire Jerry Reese today, and the Giants are not going to do that, you've got plenty of ammo, I think, to do it. But to get back to 2015, you fired the head coach or forced him out, however you want to phrase it. You kept the general manager. That was a half measure. And then when you promoted McAdoo and kept Spags and kept Tom Quinn and promoted Mike Sullivan, and basically kept the staff intact, it was a half measure. So now you're in a situation here, in my opinion, where I think there's more to justify keeping McAdoo at this point than Reese if you decide, okay, we need to make a move, just because McAdoo made the playoffs last year. It's his second year. He's a young head coach. You believed in him. I think it's a very good argument to make, even though this year's been a disaster, that John Mara would still believe in Ben McAdoo and think, that he can be a good coach and what the Giants need. But I don't see how you could justify firing Jerry Reese and keeping Ben McAdoo, because we saw what happened across town when the Jets fired Mike Tannenbaum, kept Rex, brought John Idzik in. It was a complete disaster. They eventually had to clear house. I feel like you're setting yourself up for that. You're either setting yourself up for a bad situation where you have a head coach who has completely struggled in his second year, coming off a dumpster fire of a season, and now you've hired a general manager from the outside potentially who didn't hire the head coach. That doesn't work in the NFL. Or you're going to get yourself in a situation where you're threading a needle to replace Reese, basically saying, okay, we need to go hire a general manager that wants McAdoo as the head coach. Well, I feel like at that point you get in a situation where, I mean, what are you doing there? Are you promoting a guy like Kevin Abrams or Mark Ross? I mean, that's basically copying what you did with Tom Coughlin, and that hasn't really done much, it seems. Are you basically, cherry picking a guy like Dave Gettleman, who has a past with the franchise, and you're saying, well, basically he wants a job, so he'll be able to work with McAdoo. I just feel like if you keep the head coach and don't keep the general manager, it's not a good setup. No more half measures for John Mara. He either needs to clean house, as Steve wrote on Sunday night, and blow everyone out and completely start fresh, which is something the Giants historically don't do, or he needs to batten down the hatches, keep everybody there, and try to find a path forward. And if you keep everyone there, in my opinion, you need to have a broad multi-year plan, because Giants fans, I think, are starting to come around to this. They tried to win now with Eli. It failed miserably. The window, in my opinion, is shut. Eli might be here for another year or two, and of course you're going to try to win games and be competitive, but the Giants need to start building the bridge. The Super Bowl window is likely, barring something unforeseen, slammed shut. Jake Elliott probably slammed it shut when he kicked that 61-yard field goal in Philadelphia. They need to start planning for the future, and they need to have a multi-year plan. And look, I mean, it's John Mara's sell job. If he thinks that Jerry Reese and Ben McAdoo are the guys that he wants to operate this plan and bring the Giants into their new era, then that's his decision. He's the owner, but he's going to have to go sell it. I think it's going to be a very tough sell. But I don't think you can keep McAdoo and get rid of Reese. It's all or nothing at this point. You had your one shot to do the half measure with Coughlin. It hasn't worked. Now you've got to make a stance. It's a fork in the road. You got to take one side.
Yeah, it's not easy, Dan. I mean, the Giants have a lot to try to figure out here between now and I guess Black Monday, and what they're going to do, if they're going to reset this thing. I have no idea if the next 11 weeks how much it impacts it. If some of these young guys play a little bit better, if they win some games, does that save jobs? I don't even know how Mara approached this, but here's what I just keep looking at it in terms of, is it time to completely blow the whole thing up? And I mean Jerry Reese included in that. The Giants have won double-digit games. I kept thinking last year that maybe it was just an anomaly what we were seeing, because it just felt weird. Like they had been bad for a while, then they got really good, and now they're back to being bad again. They won last year. I can't take it away from them, but the Giants have won double-digit games in a season once since 2010, and that was last year. They're going to have their fourth losing season out of the last 5. I mean, typically, Dan, in the NFL, when you're that kind of team, a big reset's going to happen sooner than later.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you have to hope doesn't happen, the Odell injury can't be used as an excuse, because, I mean, they were 0-4 with him in the lineup. The offense was broken. His flashes of brilliance was the only thing that made it somewhat functional, but they can't look at it at the end of the season and say, hey, we went 2-14, but if we only had Odell, because they had him long enough to know that this team was not a winning team. And granted, I think it's just going to, completely bottom out without him. But like you said, when you look at it from that Super Bowl year, they went 9-7, 7-9, 6-10, 6-10, 11-5, now 0-5 with, no end in sight to the losing. Second time in 3 or 4 years that they've started out 0-5. I mean, it's like you said, you need to just, take the match and just torch it, I think, at this point. I mean, James said, Reese survived 2015. That was debatable. Had the big rebound in 2016. That looks like fool's gold. We went out, spent a bunch of money. It's not like he really built a team with a bunch of great draft picks. You're looking at Eric Flowers, top 10 pick, complete bust. Eli Apple, top 10 pick, well on his way to being a bust, and he's getting benched and not happy about it. It'd be interesting to see where that goes. But I don't know exactly where they go. They don't have a real direct line because they're kind of caught in between, because like James said, they went for it. So now you have all these guys who are in their late 20s on huge contracts. I mean, I know James, there's a few guys he thinks could maybe get axed to clear some cap space, but then what are they going to go do with that cap space? I think they're kind of stuck with a lot of the core of this roster. They have big decisions coming up with Odell, Landon Collins, so it's not like I don't think they can tear down the roster. I mean, unless they really get drastic and cut ties with Eli, which, I mean, I don't think they'll do that. I don't think it's gotten to that point. But I don't know where they go from here. I mean, I don't, whether it's Reese or some other GM, I don't know that there's some solution that, they just have to do this and then, hit it on a draft pick early and they'll be right back in contention. They're just stuck in that no man's land where they have a veteran team built to win that isn't winning. And a lot of these guys, like I said, locked up with big contracts, big cap hits. So there's no real help on the way next offseason that I can see. So I think, yeah, you basically burn it down as far as the, front office and coaching staff probably. And then you have to just, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm still so stuck on where they go with having Eli as the quarterback. Will this franchise really move on from the guy who's, represented them so well, who, Mara loves so much? I don't know. That's what's going to be the most fascinating thing to see how that plays out.
I think the one thing that fans need to understand about Eli, and this is just my personal opinion, I do not look. He has no trade clause, and he wouldn't get anything back in a trade anyway. So this whole idea that like they're gonna flip him to the Jaguars for like this boatload of picks, that's stupid. The second thing is I don't think Eli is the guy who's gonna go someplace else to play out the string. I think if the Giants went to Eli and said, "Look, we need to make a change," and this is just my personal opinion, no reporting here, I think Eli would just retire and go about his life. I don't think Eli is like his brother, where he's gonna, definitely he's gonna want to go someplace new. I mean, his family's here. He's built a house in Union County. I mean, this is where Eli is. I think Eli wants to be a Giant forever, and I just think that he's not gonna rock the boat. And I don't think that. I mean, look, maybe the Giants decide they've got to completely blow us up, but I do think he's back next year just because of the money and because of the fact that, as Dan said, they're stuck. I mean, they're completely stuck. This is what happens when I think, and was probably always inevitable. I mean, they always were going to have to pay, the check at some point for the big free agent spending spree. I just think they thought that they would have, a championship out of it. But, this is what it is. So, it's a mess. And I think Giants fans need to stop saying, oh, they're a left tackle away, or, oh, they're this away. No, you're not. You're a ways away. You're not contending this year. You're probably not contending next year. It's probably time to tear it down. It just depends on how drastic the tear down is going to be.
I look at the season moving forward, and we're talking about tear down and how much that time they have left. Dan, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that there still are 11 weeks to go? And I don't mean for fans who have to watch the games. I mean, let's just use the perspective of John Mara having to make decisions. I almost feel it's easier if today or yesterday was week 17, right? Just axe everybody, get them all out. This team's awful. Over the next 11 weeks, they're likely going to win a couple games. They're going to have some young players. Well, maybe not. But
likely might be a bit strong.
Okay, they might win a couple games. They probably will have, or they can't have weeks worse than yesterday, right? Yesterday is probably, Sunday was probably the worst day they're going to have all year, all things considered. Do you think that clouds judgment? Shouldn't? I mean, they have 11 weeks to see the coach try to work through this. 11 weeks to see some young guys maybe start to get in there. I almost feel like that it would make it harder on an ownership group to say, maybe I don't know now. Like, do you think they'll just be cold and calculating about what they have to do, or do you think these next 11 weeks could make it more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to the start of your question. I think it would be better if it was week 17 because, yeah, you could just make the decisions, rip off the Band-Aid. And I think the next 11 games, it's going to be brutal. Like, you can't overlook the fact that Odell was the only thing that really gave this team a chance offensively. They're going into Denver on Sunday night, most likely without Odell, most likely without Brandon Marshall, most likely without Sterling Shepard. I mean, my goodness, against that pass rush, that defense, it is going to be a bloodbath. I think there's going to be a few more of those on the schedule. So it's going to be absolutely painful. I mean, now listen, if they somehow, behind Travis Rudolph, and now there's a report out that Tavares King is coming back, if these guys come and these plucky little underdogs get to 8-8 and they're fighting and clawing and against the NFC East teams, even if they're not going to make the playoffs, but they spoil the Eagles or the Cowboys, whatever. If that somehow happens, that obviously bodes well for McAdoo. I mean, listen, he's going to have to go all out to win these games. It's like it goes back to what we were talking about last week with tanking. I mean, there's no tanking going on because McAdoo, if they go 2-14, he will tank for someone else to get a high draft pick. So they're going to go all out, and if somehow that happens, then sure, that might cloud the situation, and it would be tough probably to fire him if they win 4 out of 5 games at the end, even if they're meaningless, because it would leave a good taste probably in Mara's mouth. I think they do need to be cold and calculating and just look at the big picture. That it's just a flawed setup. I mean, even now it's kind of tough. It's unfair a little bit. But you look back at 11-5, they won so many games that they either had no business winning or they made a big stand late that very easily could have gone the other way. It's easy to say now in hindsight, but that was clearly an inflated record. I mean, all the sabermetrics type of breakdowns. This was not an 11-5 team last year, but hey, the guys rose to the occasion. You give them credit for that. But just as they're probably not this bad, but nothing's going their way. They're not making any breaks for themselves. But I think you have to just look at the big picture. Again, I don't think they're going to go 8-8 no matter what. But I think no matter what happens these last 11 games, I think there's enough evidence that this isn't working. And I think it would be kind of foolish to get fooled by a couple of good games late in the season if that does happen. Like I said earlier, it'd be foolish to use Odell's injury as an alibi. But I mean, I think the decision's gonna be made for them because I just can't see with the lack of offensive talent they're gonna have now this team putting any sort of run together. So I think it'll be an easy decision based on the results on the field, whether it's based on right now or what we're gonna see over the next 11 weeks. I think the same conclusion will be reached.
Going
James,
8-8.
go ahead.
Going 8-8 would be the worst thing that could happen to this franchise. Going 6-10 would probably be the worst thing that can happen to this franchise. Because if they go 6-10 or 8-8, they're going to go up there and they're going to say, well, we lost 2 games by a field goal. We could have been 2-3. Odell got hurt, blah, blah, blah. You can't bring this whole team back next year, slap a couple of Band-Aids on it, and just say, okay, Super Bowl now. Now we're going to – it's over. You have to blow this up, whether it means you take care of the leadership or the roster. You have to make major changes. And I just feel that and Dan's right, they're not – look at their schedule. I mean, I think they're going to have a hard time getting to 4 wins. I don't think they're going to get to 8. But
When's the first win? I was looking at it last night. I
have no idea.
So it's Denver on Sunday. That's not happening.
No.
Seattle comes in after that. I know Seattle's a weird team on the road, but that's not happening.
Nope.
Bye week, the Rams come in. The Rams are just better than them. I mean, maybe that's a wacky game because the Rams are still young and traveling, but that's mid-November. I mean, we're talking mid-November without a win.
They're going to go to San Francisco, but they're going to have to fly across the country.
James, if they can't beat the Niners, I don't know.
Yeah,
I said 3-13 on Twitter late Sunday night, early Monday morning. I forget. I mean, I think week 17 against the Redskins at home. I mean, the Redskins could be out of it. They could be mailing it in. Week 16 in Arizona. I mean, I think the Cardinals are just the Cardinals. Honestly, the Cardinals are basically, if you think about it, they're sort of a cautionary tale for the Giants.
Yeah,
they went 8-8 last. I mean, that's what the Giants are. I mean, they're kind of the Cardinals, except the Cardinals had a little bit more playoff success. And I think their head coach knows what he's doing a little bit more. But I think that, yeah, I mean, maybe the Cardinals, if it's just 2 god-awful teams on Christmas Eve, I mean, maybe it's just, look, it's very possible this is going to end up being the worst season record-wise in franchise history. I mean, that's pretty jarring for what they came into.
Yeah, it is. And when you put it that way, I mean, that's kind of why we had this conversation, that this house might get cleaned out. I mean, I don't know how anyone recovers from GM to the head coach to the quarterback. If that's the way it ends up, I just can't see they roll anything a part of this back next year. All right, let's wrap with this. Let's just look forward from this perspective. Wins and losses, who knows? I mean, I think we all think they're going to lose on Sunday when you guys go to Denver. But just what do you think? One more thing I wanted to mention, and our producer Andrew pointed this out. I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but this has been out there. It is ironic. It is what it is. The Giants haven't won a game since that photo on the boat. Do you? I mean, that story, which was so big heading into that playoff game, you guys were inundated with it last year heading into Green Bay. I thought it would go away, but now it's kind of resurfaced because the internet is having with the idea that they haven't won a game since that photo was taken down to Miami.
Hey, listen, the curses have been started over less. I mean, and it's not just the team has, gone in the toilet since then. Odell with now 2 injuries and one obviously being catastrophic. Sterling Shepard had an injury scare in the summer and he's injured again. Victor Cruz career ended, has not seen the field since the game after the boat trip. Roger Lewis somehow is the one guy who survived, the guy who everyone I think was like, what's Roger Lewis even doing there? And he should be cut. And he's the one guy who, comes through the touchdown catch and is probably going to, be the team's leading receiver going forward. So he's maybe the one outlier there. But I think, hey, listen, I don't think it's true that there's a curse. I'm not a big believer in that as someone from Boston. I know that, they can be broken, but it's as good a theory as any, because it's hard to understand how this team was cruising along 11-5 and has just, it's been Murphy's Law. Everything that could go wrong since that boat trip has gone wrong. And then one thing that I will say, if you step back a little bit more of a serious note, Ben McAdoo has been a player's coach from day one. And that boat trip is exhibit A of why it's not a good idea to be a player's coach. It just really doesn't work. I don't think it works at all in the NFL. There's too many guys, too many big personalities. You can't make concessions for stuff. Listen, he couldn't prevent them from going on the trip. It's their off day. But the way he kind of excused it, and I think he kind of wishes he probably didn't in hindsight, because he's made some comments that, he wishes they made better decisions off the field or whatnot. But I think a lot of the cracks you're seeing is, and maybe, and this is me just drawing some conclusions, is maybe him being a little too easy on these guys. They're veterans, and he trusts them to always make the right decisions, and they clearly didn't last year with that. And just some of these little cracks we're starting to see now, it's going to be tough for him to start cracking the whip, because he's kind of let him get away with things. Oh, he plays music at practice, all this nonsense that meant nothing, but got trumpeted as, oh, wow, he's so innovative, he's so different. I mean, football coaches have pretty much been the same way from the beginning of time, kind of that hard-ass Bear Bryant mentality, and that's what works. And I think McAdoo tried to be this connect with the millennials guy, and maybe it worked that first year, especially because he was such a contrast from Coughlin. But now his leadership is being put to the test, and clearly it's failing. The team is failing in close games, stupid mistakes, bad penalties, all that type of thing. So that's a roundabout way of saying that maybe the boat itself isn't the curse, but it was a symptomatic of the bigger issues maybe within this team.
All right, James, let's end with this. And that's a good point Dan made there. Just the style that McAdoo brought and how it's kind of evolving as the year goes on. It leads my last question for you guys. 11 games to go. Forget wins and losses. What do you expect from a competitive standpoint? And I mean from the Giants competing, not the game scores. Do you get the sense, and it's just a guess, I mean, none of us know, but James, do you get the sense, we'll go to you and then Dan to end it, that they're gonna bust it for the next 11 weeks? And we see this once in a while where bad teams do bust it and play hard and push teams. And then you see sometimes, and it doesn't happen, right away. It could happen 3, 4, 5 weeks from now. They just quit and they'll lose games by 30 points. I mean, it happens in the NFL where teams do that. What's your sense with this group going down the stretch of this season, considering where we're at?
Yeah, I think. Well, let me start. 2015, that was my first year in the beat. They busted it for Tom.
Yeah, they did.
They did not quit on Tom. Now, look, this is not a slight on McAdoo, but Tom Coughlin's Tom Coughlin. He's not Ben McAdoo. I don't think has the control of that locker room and the like the way Tom did. Now, I think if they start losing every game by wide margins, then John Mara's decision on the head coach is probably going to be made for him. I do think that, you have to be careful of a couple things. One, there are probably some games on this schedule that they're just naturally going to lose no matter how hard they play. I mean, I think the Denver coming up might be one of them. When the Chiefs come here, that's another one. If the Raiders get themselves righted, that's another one. So I do think that the Giants can still play hard every week, but still end up with a couple of really ugly losses when this is all said and done. I just think the real dangerous spot for the Giants would be sort of like I think what happened to a point in Rex's final year with the Jets, where for the most part they played hard, but there were like those games against the Bills where they just completely were folded like a cheap suit. Ben McAdoo can't have that, especially against division opponents. You have 3 of your final 4 games against division rivals at home. You cannot give up a 30-point loss to any of those teams at MetLife Stadium. I think that'll be the true test. So I as of now, I think that McAdoo will have the guys playing hard for him. I don't know if it's going to necessarily show on the scoreboard every week, but that's not really what the focus has to be. The focus has to be on the on-field product. But, I mean, like, for instance, if they go out and lose by 30 points to the 49ers in a couple of weeks, I mean, that will be like, okay, this is done. So for now, I think, it's a lot of young guys who I think, they're just kind of – I mean, a lot of these guys on this team are fighting for jobs for their careers. So I think in that sense, the fact that it's a young team means they're going to play hard. But I think that I'm a lot less certain that this is going to last at this level for 11 weeks now that the season's gone than I would have been if Tom Coughlin was the head coach.
Dan, how do you feel? Then they're going to play hard all year, or you think at some point this thing gets ugly?
I mean, I think they'll play hard, to an extent. If it gets real ugly, then maybe they mail in the last couple of games. But who knows? Maybe they have like one of those games they really rally and surprise you and like beat the Seahawks at home. Because again, there still is some talent on this team. It's not like they're devoid of talent. The fact that Odell's out, I keep going back to that point. That just makes it hard for me to imagine them actually beating a good team because I just don't see how they'll be able to score enough points. That's just such a huge loss, and the offense is going to be so hopeless without him. So I think that they could have fought hard with Odell and definitely, upset a team here. I don't know that they can really do that just because the offense just doesn't have any firepower. But, I think that the other thing to keep an eye on is the injury list. I'm not saying guys are faking anything or dogging anything, but it's a little tougher to come back from that tweaked hamstring or that rolled ankle when the team's 0-6, 0-7. Again, I'm not singling any player out. I don't know the severity of any of their injuries. I'm just saying the injury list does grow a little bit longer. And as you get deeper into the season and it's a lost season, again, guys are always going to be selfish. They're going to look out for number one. Well, I'm going to be a free agent. Am I really going to, lay it on the line in week 14 on a 2-11 team? Or am I going to, take the week off, make sure everything's right, that type of deal. So I think that obviously will hurt the overall outlook for the team if good players, if starters are nursing, nagging injuries a little bit more. Can't even say I'd fault the players. I mean, obviously you would love to see them all go all out at all times, but like I said, you got to look out for number one, and I think that's just human nature, and no one's going to want to admit that or say that, but it is a consideration you have to keep in mind. So yeah, I mean, it's probably going to get ugly. I think that they'll be able to be competitive in most games, but again, without Odell, I just can't see that really translating to wins.
I have no idea what's going to happen the next 11 weeks. I just know we're going to be here every week talking about it, and each week it's going to be something different than I would have predicted for that particular week after the game. The coach is on the hot seat. The GM's been on the hot seat for years. I'm sure as the weeks go on, Eli, just because of where he's at with his age and the situation, will be on it as well as we move forward. James, thanks for doing this. Enjoy a trip to Denver. Denver seems like a cool city, so enjoy that, and we'll catch up on the game and whatever this team looks like next week.
You got it, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joe.
And thanks to all of you for listening to this episode of Talk is Cheap. We'll be back next week. iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, everywhere listen to podcasts. We're there. Leave us a rating. Help the show grow. We'll be with you as the Giants try to figure out their mess over the course of this 2017 season. Thanks for listening.